So we're going back to the Tchum, the 2,000 amot boundary around the town. And we're going to play different kinds of games with space. We're going to see that halakhic space doesn't necessarily agree with geographical space. So we're going to twist or compress space, at least in the halakhic reality. And we're also going to see a little bit of deviance, actually, between the printed text and the Kaufman manuscript in a way that, well, anyway, we'll explain that as we get on. But let's start. We're in the 5th chapter of Eruvin. We're going to start on Mishnah 7. Classic case, actually, that should be pretty familiar to us by now. Misha hayav mizrach ve'amar livno arev liv marav. Someone was in the east, and he said to his son, or he said to his child, sorry, I took the Safari translation here, but he said to his child, prepare me an eruv in the west. So he's on one side of town, and he wants an eruv prepared on the other side of town. Or vice versa. Maybe he's in the west, and he says, prepare me an eruv in the east. The point is, he's on the opposite side of town. Maybe he's even too far to get to his eruv. Maybe he's too far to get to his eruv. Im yesh hemenu uleveitu alpaim amot. If there's 2,000 amot between him and his house, ul eruvo yoter mikan. The distance to his eruv was more than 2,000 amot. Mutar leveito ve'asur le'eruvo. He can go to his house on Shabbat, but he can't go to his eruv. That eruv effectively doesn't work for him, because when Shabbat came in, and we learned at the beginning of the Masechet, everything in Eruvin depends on the status when Shabbat came in. And when Shabbat came in, he couldn't reach that eruv. He was in the wrong place. That eruv doesn't work for him. And it's the other way too, by the way. The other way too. Le'eruv alpaim amar, le'eruvo alpaim amar. He was 2,000 amot away from his eruv. Uleveito yoter mikan, and more than 2,000 amot away from his house. Asur leveito umutar le'eruvo. He can't go to his house. He can go to his eruv, but he can't go to his house. Your Shabbat station is effectively where you are when Shabbat comes in. What if you put the eruv in town? Hanotain et eruvo but ibura shel ir. Someone who puts his eruv within the extension of the town, within one of these houses that are less than 70 amot from another house in town. Lo asa klum. He hasn't done anything. Why is that? Well, look, he can walk around town anyway, can't he? And the town has got 2,000 amot around it. So he doesn't need an eruv in town to extend himself. Putting an eruv in town does absolutely nothing. The town effectively works. It doesn't add anything to the boundaries of the town. What if he put his eruv just outside the tchum? So he puts the eruv just outside the 2,000 amot. Afilu amar. Sorry, this is very puzzling. Not no chutz la tchum. I think this should really say not no chutz la ir. This should really say put it outside the town. He can't possibly put the. Well, let's just think. Let's think this through. Afilu am achat ma sheniskar hu mafsid. If he puts it 1 cubit beyond, let's think. We can think whether that's beyond the tchum or whether that's beyond the boundary of the city. He loses what he gains. That is to say, that obviously he can gain an extra amah. He can gain an extra amah because he's put the eruv 1 amah outside the boundary, But of course, he loses an amah on the other side because he can no longer, for example, go to the other side. If he's put his eruv on the right-hand edge of the town, maybe one amah beyond the boundary, he can't go on the left-hand side of the town to the edge of the tchum. I actually think that this is referring to putting outside the limit of the town rather than putting outside the tchum. I think that's the case. Let's keep moving. We can check that overnight. Let's keep moving. But in order to keep moving, we need another picture and we need another concept. And the Bartanura, by the way, and the Rambam both bring this concept and they take it from the Gemara. Somehow the Mishnah seems to assume you know this, or this is one, the next Mishnah is one of these Mishnah which are absolutely incomprehensible unless you have this concept in your head first. And so I thought I would show you the picture first. And then once we understand the picture, then we can look at the Mishnah. And I want you to picture an eruv. That's a red dot on the left-hand side of the picture. So you put your eruv down there. And that allows you to walk in a distance around inside a boundary of 2,000 amot. It's a radius of 2,000 amot, so 2,000 amot each way. And I've pictured you on the right-hand side of the picture, the arc of this boundary. So we've got 2,000 amot between our eruv and between our boundary. And in the middle, we have a town, or it must be a little rather small. It's a small town. It's a village. It must be a small town because it's fitting within 2,000 amot. 2,000 amot are about 1,000 yards. So this is not a very big, this is not a town like Washington or London. It's a small village. The point is that inside this space, inside the 2,000 amot space, there is an inhabitation, and that inhabitation can be any size you like, providing it fits in the tchum. In other words, any size you like up to 2,000 amot. It can be a big village, but halachically, it only takes 4 amot. The halakhic size of that village is 4 amot, even though it might be 1,000 amot wide. And that means when you measure up to the city boundary, you add 4 amot, because the town takes 4 amot. That's the sort of boundary that a person takes. Maybe the city is characterized by a person. And then once you get out of the city, you start measuring again. So you actually get a lot of extra, space. You don't lose from your 2,000 amot the space of the town. And it kind of makes intuitive sense to us because we know that we can walk as far as we like in a town, by the way. That's the halacha. Remember, we learned within the town, providing there are houses every 70 cubits, you can walk as long as you like. You can walk for miles, absolutely miles. So the town, it's as if we're saying this town you can walk around, it sort of magically compresses itself down in space-time, down just to 4 amot. That's the principle. Now we know the principle, let's look at the Mishnah. And we're using the, we're reading this Mishnah, by the way, from the Kaufman, which is slightly different from the printed text. But the Kaufman actually, the text in the Kaufman actually makes sense, and the printed text doesn't. So I thought it's, and the Kaufman's a better manuscript anyway. So there are good reasons from both sides actually to learn Kaufman. But be warned, if you take down a Mishnah from the shelf, it won't read quite like this. The people of a large town can walk through the whole of a small town. Yes, that's the idea here. Look, the small town's just compresses down to 4 amot. You can just walk through it. When you're computing your 2,000 amot total, you just walk through it. It's only 4 amot. However, it's halachically it's only 4 amot. And it goes the other way too. Goes both ways. Kate Sud, how does it work? Someone, a person was in a large town and put his eruv in a small one. Maybe he was in a small one and he deposited his eruv in a large one. He can walk through all of the town and 2,000 cubits beyond it. So effectively, he gets right to the whole of that town and 2,000 amot beyond. It's almost as if he's part of that town, actually. Maybe that's the easiest way of thinking about it. Rabbi Akiva is going to disagree. The halakha is not going to go according to Rabbi Akiva in this case. But Rabbi Akiva is going to disagree. Rabbi Akiva Omer, Ein lo ela mimukomo eruvo alpaim amah. Rabbi Akiva says he's only got from the place of his eruv, he's only got 2,000 amot. In other words, the city where he's put his eruv just doesn't count for anything. He's only got 2,000 amot. That's Rabbi Akiva. And Rabbi Akiva tries to argue his point. Omar lahem, Rabbi Akiva, he said to them, he's very good actually, Rabbi, and we've seen him before, by the way, arguing his point. He doesn't let go very often. Don't you agree with me that someone who puts his eruv in a cave, don't you agree that someone who puts his eruv in a cave doesn't get more than 2,000 cubits from the place where he put his eruv? And it kind of makes sense, right? You're out in the desert, you put your eruv in a cave, clearly you get 2,000 amot around the cave. There's no doubt about it. But the Chachamim are going to come back and they're going to fight back. Amrulo, they replied, Ei matai, when is this true? Bisman she'ein ba diurin. This applies to a deserted cave. This applies to a cave in the desert where there's nobody but scorpions and snakes and bears living in the cave. Aval, yesh ba diurin. If it has residents in it. Okay, now we're talking about a city, right? If the cave has a residence in it, if it's got residence in it, you can walk through the whole of it and 2,000 cubits beyond it. In other words, a cave with residence is like a village. That's really what the sages are saying. And they end up with this slightly elusive point. Nimtza kal tocha me'al gaba. Thus, it works out that the halakha is more lenient inside it than above it. I think we're talking about the fact that somehow if you had these inhabitants inside the cave, you could walk right the way through the cave and 2,000 amot beyond it. But if the eruv was on top of the cave, which is just desert, you just have to count the 2,000 amot. And we are definitely talking about a situation where there's something going on under the ground. I mean, the Mishnah says me'al gaba, on top of it. We seem to be talking about the difference between on top of the cave and underneath the cave. If it was a city on top of the cave, it wouldn't make any difference, right? They're both cities. But if the law's more lenient within it must be inhabited, and above it must be desert. I think that's what's going on here. I'm not sure. And the measurer, we talked about the measurer a few Mishnayot ago. So for the measurer, she amru notnin lo apaim, she afilu sof midato kale bimara. And to the measurer of whom they spoke, they gave him a distance of 2,000 cubits, even if the end of his measure terminates within a cave. So he gets 2,000 cubits, even if the measure terminates within a cave, which is the case, of course. But if it was an inhabited cave, and if the measure encompasses the whole of the cave, then, of course, the whole of that cave, like a small village, would be included within the eruv and would, of course, compress down to 4 amot.